The Business of Art, brought to you by the Video Department.
What happened to your big?
What happened to my big headphones?
Yeah.
I still have my big headphones. I just feel like when only one person is wearing big headphones, it is, one, obviously more obvious. Like it's harder to see that I'm wearing headphones on this shot. But two, it kind of would disconnect me from the I can already say the customer.
I'm not your customer.
You're not my customer at all. So we have a special episode today of the pod. We have my darling wife, Allison Polson, on the podcast, formerly known as Allison Paige Gilman.
The artist formerly known as.
The artist formerly known as Allison Paige Gilman. I just heard a little bit today about why Prince did that.
Did the symbol?
Well, why he was referred to as the artist.
Well, because you can't refer to, like, it was a symbol. It was no letters.
That's not why he chose the artist, though. It was because that is how they were referred to in contracts.
Ah, yeah, that makes sense.
So it was like his kind of like sticking it to the man, like that's how everyone is referred to in all contracts ever.
I kind of love that.
Yeah.
Shout out Anthony Cosby Knowles.
Shout out Anthony Cosby Knowles. Why don't you tell the audience what our connection is to Anthony Cosby Knowles and Prince?
He and his band performed at our wedding.
Right.
Best wedding band of all time, because they're not a wedding band. So it was perfect. A little cameo by Duran Tyree. Little cameo by Matt Polson.
What did Duran sing? I don't even remember.
Isn't she lovely?
Of course he did. It's a perfect song for Duran to sing. I've heard Duran sing many a Stevie Wonder song at karaoke.
Yeah.
Mostly, mostly at Barcode. But yeah, if you are a Richmonder and you are familiar with Anthony Cosby Knowles and his incredible Prince tribute act, just, imagine having the most amazing wedding reception. It was really just the reception.
Yeah. Started with let's get go crazy. What
The dearly
tense
beloved
of the verb is it? Let's go crazy?
Yeah.
Let's get crazy.
You're confused because we're talking about the past.
Am I?
But the name of the song, I believe, is Let's Go Crazy.
Well, we'll have to fact check that.
Yeah, but it's the song that starts with...
Dearly beloved.
Yeah. And we did this at Triple Crossing.
Fulton.
Thank you for specifying.
And yeah, Anthony started us with that. He did Purple Rain, which I now consider our first dance song, even though it was not sanctioned. And you did a little George Michael Elton John action.
We did.
You did.
What do you mean?
You really did.
Okay.
I kind of did. I was a little surprised.
Yeah, I surprised Allison with one of our favorite duets, which is Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me. So we had, before we got married, right, we had already planned, before the marriage had actually happened, we had already planned our honeymoon.
Oh, yeah, honeymoon for sure.
And so we had, the last day of our honeymoon was going to see Elton John.
In Barcelona.
And so I thought it would be fun to surprise her with that song, but it's a duet. So I kind of knew that she knew it roughly because we talked about doing it at karaoke.
Yeah.
And so I had our mutual friend, guest of the pod, Maggie Bavilac, standing by with a giant, SNL style cue card that had her lyrics on it.
Had the Elton lyrics, yeah.
And my favorite part of it was it started.
I know what you're going to say.
And First of all, it started a little slow tempo, and I think Allison's favorite part was like 20 seconds into it, I like sped.
You temp up the drummer.
I temped up the piano player.
Yeah,
it was just
yeah.
piano
Yeah,
at that
it was
point.
piano.
I temped up the piano player. My wedding is my wedding. And
our wedding.
As soon as you're right, and as soon as the as soon as I started my part, Maggie went into full display mode with the cue card.
Even though there's like 90 seconds.
It's at
2
least
minutes.
90 seconds before she got, but God bless her, Maggie just stood there. She was so excited to have the job.
And she performed her duties brilliantly.
She did. It was great.
You know that a lot of people don't believe that was really a surprise for me?
What do you mean they don't believe it?
They think that I was in on it, and I was
Well,
like,
do they believe it once you tell them?
I guess. They're like, no way you didn't know. And I'm like, no, I literally had no idea.
Did you see her face?
Yeah.
There's video.
Yeah.
You can see her face.
I think I just kind of took it on pretty fast. Once we got rolling,
You're
I
you.
yes and
You're
it.
you. That's why I felt confident doing it. I also had her best friend and hopefully future pod guest, Meg Keith Carnahan, on standby with her hat.
Yeah.
Should she have taken it off?
But I did not.
But she did not. She had the hat on the entire time.
I never took that hat off.
All right. So enough about that.
Yeah.
Let's talk. Let's just start the way that all podcasts, the business of our podcast, start, which is just talking a little bit about how you grew up.
Oh my. How I grew up?
Yeah.
Okay. On a farm in rural Hanover County, Virginia. And to connect it to theater, so the story goes, I tried out for my middle school tennis team. Did not make the team in 6th grade. And the day I found out I didn't make the tennis team was the same day that Spark Core had started their semester. And my dear friend Rachel Bowman,
Shout out.
had signed up, and my mom called and basically asked if I could tack on. The rest is history.
Who were your teachers? Do you remember?
Of course. Aaron Thomas Foley, Dee Lynch, and Robin Arthur.
Whoa.
Powerhouse trio.
3 legends.
Powerhouse trio.
Well, no wonder you caught the bug.
I know.
I mean, if you have those 3 ladies teaching you,
I don't know how long Robin taught for Spark. I feel very lucky that I had her in her brief tenure. And Dee went on to be, she did voice lessons for me, before any audition I had. I went to Dee. And Aaron performed at Aaron's wedding.
Yeah. Aaron is a legend, of course. Started Live Art and
now Free Horse Arts,
Yep.
which I just kind of helped with recently.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that.
Hey.
I knew you'd listen to the pod before. Which is why when I asked you to talk about growing up and you seemed thrown off.
I just didn't expect, I expected how did I get started in theater? But I quickly made my way there.
Yeah, I like to get there. Well, let's go back. What was it like growing up on a farm?
I did not like it. I didn't like to be outside. I did not like the smells. I did not like the isolation and the quiet.
That's probably what you didn't like the most, right? The
Yeah.
isolation.
My childhood bedroom had the upstairs bathroom was connected to my childhood bedroom, and I would lock the bathroom door and lock my other bedroom door to make it like I was living in a little apartment because I so desperately wanted to live in a small, cramped, 1-bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
That was my fantasy. And then you realize once you live that fantasy that it's not all that fantastic after all. And now going out to Gill Manor, I just love it.
You have 2 younger siblings.
Correct.
And it's a family farm, so you grew up around the family, still very close with a lot of your family. When you started theater, when you started doing Spark, Was that like an escape for you?
Yes. Gotta get out of this one horse town. That's literally what it felt like.
Yeah.
It did though. It felt like it was like bigger and better things. Like I know that's kind of a common refrain of people who like grow up in small towns, like feeling very confined to it, but I really did. And you know, like Spark was in the city and the theaters were in the city, and I just like loved that part of it. We were just talking the other day about the Empire and like how fun it was to take little field trips to downtown and get to go to like Terrence or Joe's Inn. Actually, I don't think my family went to Joe's Inn. We did Terrence, we did Julian's.
What was the soup that Terrence was known for? Was it crab bisque?
She crab.
She crab.
She crab.
All day she crab.
All day.
Yeah. What happened to that area? When did it change from being like the place where families were really excited to go to kind of being something else? I think it's still a place that people like to go. I just don't think it's like a family spot anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's with VCU kind of growing. It's kind of more young down there now.
That's interesting, yeah.
It's
That's true.
A lot of like
It's less
bars.
businessy.
Yeah. It's more, honestly, it's quite residential.
Residential and bars.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
really kind of
we
it.
both used to live right there.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, as we realized, the reason we moved from there is it's impossible to park. And that's a huge deterrent for
Yeah.
families, for anyone, I mean, tourists isn't necessarily the right word, but visitors to the city just don't want to park. And like, you can have a great experience in the city, in the Fan, and you can park anywhere.
Yeah.
So,
That's true. Parking is much easier, pretty much all over the Fan.
yeah. When you cross over like Belvedere, basically, it's hard to park.
Yeah. Certain spots, like in certain spots, it's easy to park because there's nothing there. But yeah.
Right.
But yeah. So doing theater all throughout high school, you decide to pursue theater for college. Mm-hmm. Talk about that.
I mean, honestly, my parents were like really very supportive of me doing that, which is amazing. Shout out. And I didn't know, like I was really lost when it came to applying for colleges, like where I wanted to go. So the way I kind of did it was I chose colleges adjacent to big cities and just auditioned. So I auditioned at Fordham in New York, not NYU, just Fordham. Emerson in Boston, Northwestern for Chicago, American, which is outside of DC, just really random. And I think I did maybe Emory University, which is outside Atlanta. Like that was how I chose schools, but it was really random. Like looking back, that was such a random way to decide what colleges I wanted. Like I didn't look up best theater departments.
Really?
I looked up like theater department near big city.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, but I lucked out like ending up at Emerson, and of course I applied to VCU, and pretty much it came down to VCU versus Emerson. VCU had offered me a full ride, which was very kind, but I declined, much to my dad's chagrin, and accepted $32,000 worth of student loan debt from Emerson, which is not that bad.
Could have been worse for sure.
For a private university in Boston.
Yeah.
Pretty good. I think I was frugal.
Well, it's questionable going into any amount of debt for a theater degree, but that's a conversation for a different time.
Fair enough.
So what was that experience like in Emerson?
It was great. I loved being in Boston. I think I needed to leave Richmond to come back to Richmond. I think had I gone to VCU, I would have graduated and then immediately wanted to move away. So I'm kind of glad that I scratched my travel itch, my living in a big city itch, without like actually, you know, my parents were still kind of supporting me through college, though I definitely worked a lot when I was in college too. Got to go to LA for a semester, try that out, hated that. Did summers in New York and Connecticut and Boston, which, just really good experiences all around. And then Emerson helped me land my apprenticeship in Louisville, which I loved. I probably loved Louisville second to Richmond of anywhere I've ever lived. It was great, but it was also very much like Richmond in scope and drivability and on a river, like all of the same kind of highlights. And then that led me right back here, right back to RVA. And now I'm RVA for life. You can't drag me out of here.
Talk to us more about Emerson. What were some of the highlights of your time there? What did you do? What did you learn?
Honestly, I would say the highlight, because I entered Emerson and was accepted to Emerson for a performance degree, but there was kind of two tracks, the BA or the BFA, and I was in the BA track, which was more theater studies. And I met my favorite professor, Dr. Carl, and he got me to kind of focus on my why, like, why am I doing theater? Why do I love theater? And I realized that it was a selfish pursuit for me. It was an ego-driven pursuit for me. I felt good at it and I enjoyed it and I made a lot of friends and ultimately a husband out of theater. Like, that's all great, but it didn't feel like a mission-driven pursuit. And he encouraged me to, and my whole class, but what is your why? And I really kind of broke it down to my why is wanting everyone to be able to have access to theater, to be able to fall in love with it the way that I did. So that started like my accessibility theater journey right then, Dr. Carl. And really from that moment on, I stopped performing at Emerson. I didn't do another show. From then on, kind of switched my focus to accessibility, which, kind of is just admin in general, which is how I kind of landed in events and marketing. But everywhere I've been since that, I've found my way into doing accessibility oriented things, even if I'm working in a marketing department, because that's really important to me. I hate the thought that someone, because of a disability, might not be able to enjoy theater. That's really sad. I want everyone to be able to have access to theater. So that became kind of my why, and it morphed into ASL, which is at its core about providing access in all segments of life.
And just for those who don't know, what does ASL stand for?
American Sign Language.
All right, let's put a pin in that and get back to it in a second. Let's continue along this timeline and talk to us about Louisville. What were you doing?
Louisville?
That's what I said. Roll back the tape.
Louisville.
Theater?
Louisville Theater. I was in the apprenticeship program. I think it was called the Professional Training Company, PTC. And it was 40 apprentices that would be hired to work at Actors Theater of Louisville. 20 were acting interns, 20 were a variety of administrative roles. I was in the marketing department, specifically events and festival was mine, because at the time Actors Theater had the Humana Festival of New American Plays. So I was very heavily involved in the coordination and execution of that festival, and everything from, picking up guest artists at the airport to throwing opening night parties to professional development events to coordinating college student volunteers, like you name it, I worked on it.
And was this this is a 3-month apprenticeship?
9 month.
9 month.
Yes.
And is it paid?
A little bit. I think I was paid $5,000.
For the whole 9 months?
For the whole 9 months, which is basically like a housing stipend,
right? Is
what they considered it. Like, it went towards housing. It was not going to cover housing, but...
What about your food and stuff like that?
Good luck.
Really?
Yep. It was
So you
tough.
had to find your own housing?
Yeah. Yeah, they had some connections to nearby like apartment buildings, but I ended up rooming with a friend from Emerson who was in the education department, and we found an apartment that was a little ways away but was more affordable on Muhammad Ali Boulevard.
And so they're able to find, was everyone pretty much paid the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
So they're able to find 40 young people, and they pay them, what's 5,000 times 40? That's 200,000.
No. 20.
No.
No. Are we done?
$200,000.
40.
The way that the new calculator works is very confusing.
It's
I
so
like
hard.
it, but it's confusing. Yeah, $200,000.
Wow, you were right. That seems so high.
Well, it seems high, but when you factor in they're getting 40 people
I
for that amount of
know,
money, that's
I
kind of
know.
crazy.
And we did get a lot of opportunities also. Like,
To earn money?
no. No. But opportunities for our future career. I mean, it's like an internship.
Was this like a 40-hour a week thing?
Yeah. Yep. I was in the office 9 to 5. And then actors, I don't really know what their situation was. Certainly weren't in the office 9 to 5. They did like understudy tracks. Some of them got roles in the shows, just based on auditions. And then the acting company did their own shows as well. But yeah, no, not a lot of opportunities to make money, but it looks really good on a resume, and a lot of people have gone on to pretty successful careers since then.
In what way?
Some of the actors I've seen have just been quite successful, just following them online, and a couple of the directors are doing really well. A lot of the people in admin have moved on to bigger and better things. It's one of those things, like, definitely I feel privileged that I was able to swing something like that, to get it on my resume, because if you don't have support, like, it's tough to make ends meet on $5,000 for 9 months without, either having savings or parental support or something else going on to help supplement. So
Yeah, I mean, you kind of talk about like accessibility of theater, and I feel like that is in itself illustrating a huge part of the problem. Is that theater, to use a hype word right now, it's like you have to be privileged to even exist in the theater because you get paid so little to do it. That's a problem. That's
For
a
sure.
real problem.
yeah, I mean, it's like, do you have 40 apprentices, but and I hope I'm right about 5,000. It might have been more. It wasn't much. Less than 10,000, I'll say for sure. But yeah, do you get 40 apprentices, give 40 people this opportunity, and pay them, let's just say, $5,000 for 9 months? Or do you get 20 apprentices and pay them $10,000? It's like, give less opportunities, but you get more money. But then it's just the elite people that get these opportunities. And I don't know. It's tricky for sure.
It is tricky. And this is a bigger conversation for another podcast, but the whole business model of theater is really in trouble because of that and other things. It's just like not self-sustaining. And unfortunately, I see nothing in the news about either side trying to revamp and reboost the NEA, National Endowment for the Arts. There's like I guess it's just because there's so much stuff going on in the world that there's no conversation about the arts, and it really sucks.
Yeah. No, you're right.
I think that's going to be a big conversation moving forward. I think we're going to see a rejuvenation in that conversation in the next couple of years about how do we get more national support for arts.
I hope so. I mean, I know, local theaters here are applying for their grants and getting them, but it's still meager compared to what's needed. And, like, the real estate is expensive, and now, manpower is just getting more and more expensive too, and everything is more expensive. So
Yeah, the only newer, I won't name any names, but like the only newer business models that I have seen work for theater only work because the person who owns the real estate is wealthy. And because there's basically a, what's the word that they used to use in ancient Rome? There is a, starts with a P, I think, patron. So there's a patron who is like saying, I'm going to buy this building because I love the arts. And eventually, hopefully, I'll get my money back or something. But really, I'm doing this because I love the arts. And then somebody who is really talented comes in and is really well connected. That's a really big key, too. The specific business I'm thinking of, the person who runs it is very well connected.
What are you talking about?
I'll tell you off mic. And they've had a very successful business model. But what I will say is they do not have a resident theater company.
So it's more of a venue.
It is a venue,
Yeah.
but they still are very theater involved, and they do like one-nighters and different things
Yeah.
like that. And actually, I just saw that they're getting ready to do their first like actual like company production of a play, of a musical.
That's interesting. I mean, yeah, it's like
There are plenty of people out there with money.
you just made me think of something, and then I lost my train of thought. Patron. I can't remember, but yeah, it's an expensive business.
It is an expensive business.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. You were talking about patron, and this is a little bit different, but the Humana Festival for New American Plays was successful because Humana Insurance or whatever like funded the festival.
Right.
And they pulled out around COVID times, and as far as I know, have not returned, and thus the festival, you know, if it even exists at all anymore, is nothing like what it once was. It used to be you could see like 6 plays in 3 days and never have to leave the building, and there was food, and there was workshops, and there was meet and greets, and there was parties. I mean, it was such an amazing festival. But that takes a lot of cash. I'm sad you never got to experience that. Hopefully it'll come back in some way, in some form.
And is that theater still going?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they are. Dracula and...
Did they do Dracula this year?
Yeah,
Did they do it every year still?
I think so.
Talk about that.
Actors Theater does an annual Halloween production of Dracula. You see that too?
What was that?
I don't know. I think it was across the street.
Okay. I just saw something that looked like it was in our backyard. It looked like a car just went across our backyard.
Well, hopefully we're good.
Yeah, I didn't hear a crash. I think
No,
we're okay.
I think so. Not going to be Boulevard Burger and Brew up in here.
Ooh, too soon.
Yeah, they do an annual... I'll speak to when I was there, which was 2016-17, because I'm not 100% sure exactly if they're still doing it this exact same way, but they did a production of Dracula every Halloween and a production of A Christmas Carol every December holiday, and they just freaking sold out. Like, people could not get enough of it. See it because it was a tradition. They saw it every year. And of course, the professional training company, the actors, comprised a large part of the ensemble for both of those. And yeah, it was just really, really big money makers for the company, and it allowed them to do more avant-garde, edgy, no-name stuff in the rest of their season. And then, you know, they kind of became a jumping off point for many plays that went on to huge success. They started at actors. So it was cool. I mean, you know, internally, like, everyone kind of like rolls their eyes at the Dracula and the Christmas Carol, but it works.
Yeah, right. And it goes back to what John Price said in our podcast, which is, you know, if you want to be commercially successful, you have to prioritize making the art that your audience wants to see, not necessarily the art that like you feel the most passionate about.
Yeah, it sucks.
No, it doesn't suck. I understand why you say that, but I don't think it sucks because it's like what Jack White says. It's like sometimes you have to put yourself in a box in order to find the way to get out of the box.
Totally.
And so here's why it doesn't suck. You find something that works. And then this is the way my brain works. You find something that works, you build the set once, you store the set, you save money, you do it again and again. Even better, you commission someone to write the show that you're doing year after year, so you own the rights.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I hear what you're saying, that it sucks.
It sucks artistically. It doesn't fulfill you. It is not something you enjoy doing, but it works and it's effective.
I hear you, but I think that is a state of mind. And I think that, again, like the Jack White, you have this box. If you have to do Dracula every year, we'll find a way to make it freaking awesome and find a way to put your unique stamp on it. That's the box that you've been put in. That doesn't mean that you have to limit yourself. But the point is finding something that the audience, it's baked in, that the audience wants to see.
For sure.
And I think, like, let's just say if Richmond were Philadelphia, there should be a theater doing 1776 every year in July.
Right.
If there was a version of that was suitable to Richmond, we should be doing that every year in the same time. That makes sense. Because people, pretty much everyone likes familiarity. Like, they find comfort in something that they know and are familiar with. And the theater literally doesn't offer that, in a sense, because if you're trying to do new things all the time, if you're never repeating what you're doing, unless you can say, like, okay, every fall we're going to do a classical musical, every winter we're going to do that, etc., like, the audience has no idea what to expect.
Sure. And I think that like what you just said, the kind of framework for a season, I think that's pretty successful. Like, what to expect in terms of the different time slots.
But does anybody do that?
Virginia Rep used to do that. I don't know if they are anymore.
They used to do it in terms of, like, one's going to be a musical, etc. But I don't know that I don't know that they put that much thought into it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know either. But yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying about make it as creative as you want. And I do think that's true, and that's a fun challenge. But also, you can't deviate but so far, because the audiences expect what they expect.
Well, sure, but the flip side of that is, like we say, is that Dracula production pays for the production you get to do in the spring.
100%.
That is something weird.
Yeah, and I support it for that reason. Like, I'm not anti that kind of setup, but yeah, I just,
There's a desire, a natural human desire for new. What's next?
Yeah, like, imagine you work at this company and, September 1st rolls around and you're like, ugh, freaking Dracula again.
I think and I'm sure a lot of people would have that attitude. But on the flip side, the attitude is, all right, we're going into the fall. I know it's going to be chill. I know it's going to be easy. Like, I'm getting paid the same either way. Like, I know what I'm doing. We're going to have this set up in 3 days. Like, we're going to be able to just chill and, like, relax and get to take care of some other stuff that we don't get to take care of. It's all about mentality. And I do think, and we don't need to go into this, but I do think there is a pervasiveness of, like, the victim mentality and, like, this mentality of, like, oh, this sucks. I have to work. I have to do hard work. I have to do this thing I don't want to do. It's like, yeah, that's literally everyone in the world has to do work that they don't want to do.
Well, you're saying the opposite, that it's easy, like, to put up something like Dracula.
No, I'm saying for the people whose attitude is negative.
Right. Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
And it's not hard. That's exactly. It's not hard work to have to put up a set that you literally put up 12 months ago.
Right. It's not hard. It's not that it's hard. I think that's not what I'm trying to say, that it's hard. I'm saying it's, and, like, for me, like, being in the Apprentice Company, this was my first rendezvous with Dracula. So I'm like,
and that's the perfect thing about that model.
Yeah.
That is one great thing.
Fresh for these 40
You get 40 people
individuals
who are freaking hyped to be there all the time. That's really smart in that way.
But then you have, the tenured people who have been there for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
I think it would be challenging not to roll your eyes at Dracula coming around again. But
don't be a part of it.
Yeah. Or just accept it for what it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where it landed. Well, again, I don't know where it landed as of today, 2025, but Yeah, I think
it's like the attitude is just like either like, oh, we have to do this again, or oh, I get to be a part of something that is like a part of this culture.
Yeah, it's definitely a part of like Louisville culture. It's kind of like the Nutcracker in
Right.
Richmond. You know, some families like, you know, you go with your grandma and your aunts and uncles, and you go every year, and you have the same seats.
The Nutcracker's the closest.
You go to
thing
the
for sure.
same, you know, restaurant to eat brunch before, you know, whatever. It's like it becomes a real like tradition, and it's special. I mean, people really love it.
And then there was the time when Barksdale was doing Joseph, like for years and years and years.
Yeah, that was before my time. I
Yeah, that was
have
before my
no
time,
memory
too.
of that at all. But
No, that was
I've
before
heard of
Willa
it.
Lawn. That was like
Was it at the Empire?
at the tavern.
At the tavern.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
I
they ran. I want to say like a year. It ran there or something like that. It ran for a really long time. They stopped it, and then they brought it back and ran it again for like another 3 or 6 months or something crazy.
Wait. It was one really long run?
There was 2 really long runs.
But it wasn't like an annual thing.
No, but like that, I think that's a perfect example of like if you had that much success with Joseph, wait 2 or 3 years, then bring it back and do a special like 2-week production every year, man.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
why
crazy. I mean,
don't
Peter and the
understand.
Starcatcher could have done that if it could have ran another month.
I know. Like, well, they should program it again. Maybe not next year, but maybe 2 years from now.
Yeah, in a couple years. I mean, it did great, and it like could have done even so much better. It was literally limited by how many seats are in that theater and how many performances there were, because there was some, you know, that's the Firehouse's model, is there's always something next,
Right.
which I think is something you appreciate, but
Yeah.
it does mean that you can't, you know, there's no room for an extension. There's
Right.
no room. I mean, literally, the Firehouse team will, if the show closes at a 2 p.m. matinee on Sunday, they are striking that show 5 p.m. that
Right.
same day.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's gone by Monday morning, you know, that because that's just how quick they have to work.
That's the business model.
Yeah, and they're killing it. The production team at the Firehouse is killing it.
Yeah. All right. So you leave Louisville and you leave the theater there and you go to a theater in Richmond
I do.
pretty much immediately, right?
Yep. I literally left on a Friday and started on Monday.
And what were you doing for Virginia Rep?
I was the marketing associate,
First under
Susan Davenport, then Liz Nance.
2 legends.
2 legends. So lucky that they were my bosses. Yeah, and that was, you know, it was a good experience up until COVID, pretty much. And I don't think anybody in the theater had a good experience during COVID.
no.
That was not a unique experience by any stretch of the imagination. But I ended up leaving. You know, they kept me on. They furloughed a lot of people, but they kept me on to keep social media up and running, which is incredibly generous, especially during that crazy time.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say incredibly difficult because there's no content.
Well, the content was bedtime stories and duets.
I did a duet with Josh Moran, Agony.
Joshua. Yep. That was, I mean, you know, that was something. That was creative, and it was something. Because if were it not for those like virtual initiatives, there would have been nothing to post. There was already almost nothing to post. But yeah, so if COVID started in mid-March, I left Virginia Rep in May. So I only did a couple months like that.
And what happened after that?
Floundered for a while. What was I doing for that like in between time?
Well, you waited tables for a while.
Oh, right.
But then I'm trying to get to the next
I
thing.
know.
that we're talking about.
But I was thinking like, because that didn't start right away. But the next big thing would be Structure, Central Virginia.
Oh, Structure is spelled Struxure.
Correct.
If you're listening.
No CTX. That's
So,
Structure.
You explain from your perspective how that all happened.
URE. From my perspective, this distributorship fell into our laps via your dad. But the backstory is Structure is a national company. They're headquartered in Georgia, and they have distributors throughout the country who basically are like local reps and sell the product and install the product being a motorized aluminum pergola system, which is incredibly random, but also incredibly cool. And so in around June of 2021, God, is that right? I think so. We had 2 pergolas ordered, both in Williamsburg. So that kind of kicked us off.
You're leaving out a little bit of context, which is...
Matt's dad.
No, which is I was working for them for over 5 years.
But I think my context even predates that.
Okay.
Matt's dad and Scott, who created the product's dad, are best buddies.
Right.
And Matt's dad kind of
introduced me into the video world.
Yep.
Maybe like 5 years into Structure's existence.
and kind of provided like business advice to Scott, right?
He did, yeah.
And, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So
I did
no. So Matt's dad Al kind of helped usher this business into fruition. Cut to 5 years later, you start doing video for them. Cut to 4 years later.
Basically 6 years later.
Yeah. Cut to 6 years later, we start distributing this product in Central Virginia. So we did the 2 in Williamsburg, and then we did one in like Short Pump. That was kind of our first like sale of one.
Shout out Will Monticello.
Love him. And yeah, so now we're up and running with residential and commercial units. We have 2 coming up in Scott's Addition that are going to be super cool at the new kind of yellow umbrella complex called Ballast. So it's a restaurant and a grocery store and a speakeasy and a coffee shop and a Sears vodka tasting room. I mean, it's going to be epic. And we have 2 large pergolas up over there. So that'll be really exciting for us. And we have one coming up at a winery in Charlottesville. Yeah, it is so random. Like,
And what has been the struggle to get to where we are now?
Manpower, scheduling.
What's it been like? Describe what it's been like.
I mean, there are so many logistical challenges to Structure, especially us, Matt and I, not being the installers ourselves. We rely on other people. Like we are essentially the middleman, the broker of this whole process, but we're relying on the people at Structure HQ in Georgia for things. We're relying on our installers, of which we have 3 great teams here in Virginia. But it's just like a coordination kind of nightmare a
What
lot
was
of
the
the
learning
time.
curve for you?
Not over promising things. That was a big one. Kind of promising things that felt feasible that didn't end up being feasible.
I'm asking you more about how you felt. Like, you personally, what was it like going through that?
Oh, like,
Learning in a new business and a new skill set, etc.
I mean, I felt like an idiot a lot of the time. It was really hard. Like, I mean, truly learning everything I had done in my life, like prior to this, has been kind of something that's easy to pick up or in my wheel, marketing for a theater company. Well, I've been doing theater my whole life. So like, I kind of get how that works. And then this is just so different. It's construction and logistics and, permitting and licenses. And I mean, it's just so intense. And yeah, it was really hard. Like, I don't like feeling dumb. I don't like feeling like inadequate, but I have come a long way. I've learned a lot, and now I feel like I can have a fairly educated conversation with someone about pergolas and about Structure and the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah, it's been a lot of stress and tears and sleepless nights for both of us over the 3 or 4 years that we have been working on this. Neither of us ever thought we would be doing it. It only happened because of COVID.
Yeah.
And because we kind of like our thought process was, okay, what is required to be successful at this business? And I had been traveling the country with structure for a while. I've met a lot of successful dealers, and I knew that one secret ingredient was the husband and wife team. So right there, I was like, okay, that's a check. 2, product knowledge. Well, no one in Central Virginia knows more about structures than I do. Just because I've been working for them for 6 years, I've made so many videos. I literally filmed them for 4 days installing one and made a 33-part video series about how to install one. So there's knowledge. And then there is the sort of last ingredient for our portion, which is the sales portion. Now, neither of us have specifically been in sales, but really sales is adjacent to marketing in a way. And sales is all about relationships and making people feel like they can trust you. And I think we sort of made a calculated decision that these 3 things we can actually do. And then the hard part, well, how many structured dealers are Class A? How many people who start structured dealerships are Class A contractors? Probably not all of them anyway. I know there are a lot of people who start it because they see this as a really good business opportunity. In fact, all of the people who I interviewed were like that.
Yeah.
None of the people who I interviewed who had started structured dealerships were contractors. They were all people who saw an opportunity and they felt like they could be the best representative of the product in their area. And I think that was our calculation too.
I think we have been good stewards of the product. And now that we're about to have these very public-facing units in Scott's Addition and in the winery and stuff, I just really feel like, we have intentionally tried to build at a pace that we can keep up with. We don't want to explode this product because we have 3 installation teams
who also have
full-time jobs.
Yeah, they have businesses.
Right. And they're wonderful, and they have been very, when we have something for them, they do it.
Yeah.
They're great. That's, not what I'm saying at all, but were we to sell 10 pergolas tomorrow, we would not be able to handle that kind of growth. We needed to grow incrementally, and I think we're at a good place now to kind of start to ramp up a little bit more.
For sure. Yeah.
So I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
And it's been a very interesting challenge. I think we've grown a lot, both as professionals, but also as a couple working together. People ask me all the time what it's like working with my husband. And what I always say is we have such differing skill sets, I feel like, that we are able to almost segment everything that needs to be done in a way that I handle the things that I feel more confident in and you handle what you're more confident in. And it's almost like a pass off. I feel like I kind of get the ball rolling, get the process started, make the sale, and then I kind of pass it off to you and you handle kind of the logistical installation back end of it, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, no, it's definitely all about teamwork. And I think that this experience has made me better at the other parts of my life too. And I think that's a really big lesson from all of this for the artists, is having something else that you struggle with and that you do. Because ultimately, and I really believe this, the only way to grow is to struggle first. And just use the analogy of weightlifting. You want to grow your muscles, well, you got to struggle through lifting some weights first. That's how it works.
Running.
Yeah. Wow. What a struggle that is. But you can get to the point where you can do 26 point something miles in 4.5 hours.
4.2.
And it doesn't destroy you.
To be exact, 26.2 miles in 4 hours, 29 minutes, and 59 seconds.
And before we started dating, would you have ever thought you'd been able to do that?
Before we started dating, I don't think I had run a mile without stopping.
Right. And before we had started structure, we had done no construction jobs. And now here we are. And we've got, I'd like to think, 100% customer satisfaction rate.
Yeah.
We have great relationships with our installers.
Yeah.
And who knows what the future holds.
The best thing about, I feel like, where we're at now is the customers that we have, like, they themselves are now stewards of the product,
Yes.
which is so awesome. Like, we've had other clients want to see a pergola, so I'll text one of our existing clients, do you mind if we swing by with a potential client? And they're so great, so accommodating, and they just go on and on about how much A, they enjoyed working with us, but B, the product. And we know that the product speaks for itself.
Yeah.
But
I think
you know,
every time but one that's happened, we've made a sale, and the only time we didn't was because it was like in the fan, and it was
Yeah.
not everyone is the right candidate for our pergola.
They had a historic home.
Yeah.
Like, that's tough to fit a modern pergola
Yeah.
into a historic home. But
Before we run out of time, let's transition into what the future for you holds. You can talk to us a little bit about ASL.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just let you kind of jump in wherever makes sense. How did you land on that? I'm not going to let you jump in where it makes sense. Answer that question.
how did I land on that? I just think I've always thought it was really cool. Like, always when I've seen it, I've been like, wow, how amazing.
If you don't think it's cool, something's wrong with you.
Something's wrong with you. And because it is so cool, and it's so expressive and beautiful. And so I think what happened, and I honestly don't really remember the exact kind of trajectory, but I met with Catherine Dudley, who is
Legend.
a wonderful interpreter in this community, also a legend.
All the legends we've mentioned today have been women. Have you noticed that?
Support women. No, Catherine's great. And I met with her, and she and I have such a similar path in our lives. We both have degrees in theater, performance, like BAs in theater. We both worked in the marketing associate role at Virginia Rep. She was Barksdale, but same company. We both attended the ASL interpretation program at J. Sargent Reynolds Community College. And, now she's one step ahead of me, but I have to think that if I continue on this path, like, hopefully I get to where she is one day, 'cause she is just amazing, full-time interpreter, and she interprets theater, which is like my dream. So I saw her interpret Cinderella at Virginia Rep in December 2019. And that was when I was like, okay, like, I have to do this, because that is the coolest thing ever. Like, Catherine and one other interpreter played every role in Cinderella, and they interpreted the music and the songs and the dance, and were so expressive and theatrical. And I don't know, I just kind of felt like I want to do that. So signed up for J. Sargent Reynolds and started classes in January 2020, and got about 2 months in before COVID happened. And then all of my classes switched to online, which was kind of a nightmare. But also, I've recently heard people phrase it to me in a way that I appreciate, which is a lot of your interpreting is done online. You have a lot of stuff when you are interpreting to a computer screen, and you are receiving ASL from the computer screen. So it's actually, like, maybe not as detrimental as I always thought it was. Because it's tough. It's tough to learn a language on a computer. But I did kind of, I think, 4 semesters, maybe 5, till spring of 2021, which is when my dad got sick. So I took a break I think I did actually the summer semester, but took a break for fall 2021 and picked up again in fall 2023. So I took 2 years off. Which I needed for sure. That was definitely the right decision. But then, now I'm all set to graduate in May and hopefully start getting out there and doing the thing.
And how do you see that as an extension of all of your time in the theater? Even if you're not doing it as interpreted performances.
Right. Even if I'm not interpreting theater.
Right.
Well, everything about ASL is expressive. It's in your face. Because in spoken language, you can change the tenor of your voice to indicate how you're feeling. Like, you can say the same sentence 3 times, but depending on how your voice sounds, it could mean 3 different things. If you're angry, if you're passive aggressive, if you're sad, if you're happy, whatever. But with a visual language, you can't convey it with your tone of voice. You have to convey it with your face, with your expressions. So
These pretzels are making me thirsty. These pretzels are making me thirsty. Continue.
That was a really great illustration.
It's a Seinfeld reference.
Thank you so much. Okay. Got to get you some new references. That's on the record now. But yeah, they're called non-manual signs, and it's basically like your expressions on your face, and that is how grammar is conveyed in sign language. So I was like, oh, that it is easy for me to be expressive. Let's put it that way. So I did, my 6 semesters of ASL, and at the end, my professor told me, he was like, I never, ever had to give you any notes on your non-manual signs because they're just kind of like within me. But a lot of interpreters and people who know ASL are maybe a little more shy or less, just expressive in general.
Well, it's just an unawareness of how your face actually works.
Yeah.
Actors struggle with that too.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Like a lot of people get comments on having kind of like either thinking face, which is when you just kind of are sitting there looking puzzled, or resting bitch face, which, everyone knows what that is. But like, you don't want that to be your face when you're interpreting, because that changes the meaning of what you're interpreting. If your face looks a certain way, you need to be very neutral unless you're expressing something, specific. So it's really fun. And another thing that I mentioned the other day is I think a lot of interpreters kind of maybe have a little bit of stage fright, or don't want to be in the spotlight or with everyone's attention on them, whatever, in a like presentation or performance setting. And that is also something that I just am not too worried about for me.
And so, you'll graduate in May and you'll sort of work your way through, obviously like an end goal would be to get to interpret for the governor, or get to interpret for,
the Altria,
Rolling Stones, or whoever comes through. Rolling Stones, jeez, I'm not even that old. That was a terrible reference.
Your references today.
It doesn't matter. Who's the girl who I was saying gives me musical theater energy the other day?
Chapel Roan.
Yeah, you're gonna interpret for
that
Chapel
would be
Roan.
The dream of all dreams, to interpret for Chapel Roan, or like honestly, like either music or theater, like to get to interpret like Mamma Mia.
Well, and so that's where I was going. Is yes, obviously like the Altria, they I'm sure have dedicated ASL performances.
I think, yeah.
For, if not all shows, certainly most shows. But there's got to be a market, like a nonprofit market for this, I think. Like for a organization to rise up, that is what they do. They bring ASL interpretations to all of the performing arts in the city of Richmond. There's nothing like that, right?
Well, I'm not sure about nonprofit. Like by nonprofit, do you mean like they don't charge?
No. A nonprofit business.
Yeah.
That their mission is to do that.
So there is First Chair. I think it's called First Chair Interpreted Productions, and they kind of do the DMV.
Are they a business or a nonprofit?
I'm not sure.
That's my question, because if it's a nonprofit, then you have grant funding available.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be something where the theaters are paying for it. Like that's my goal, is to make it free for the theaters.
Right. I do think right now, and I do not know this for a fact, this is just my speculation, but I do think right now the theater would apply for a grant to go towards paying an interpreter.
Right.
That's what I think it is. I'm not
That makes
sure how
sense.
First Chair operates. And then Mosaic as well provides theatrical interpretation. But I think that's how it works. I think the theater gets the grant. They use the money from the grant to pay the interpreters to come in and interpret a performance or two. So
Well, maybe that's something you and I can
I would love
talk
that.
about for the future.
I would
I'd like
love
to
that.
have a nonprofit at some point in my repertoire of businesses.
Yeah.
And that seems like a really worthy one.
Yeah, and I think you were talking about the NEA earlier, and I think the arts are one of the things that is kind of diminishing in funding, but something that is not diminishing in funding is I mean, hopefully, is, disability access. Like, things are becoming more accessible. That's becoming more and more of a priority. It should have always been, but it's becoming more mainstream for there to be interpreted options and open captioning and like all hearing loops, all of the different things. And that's all just deaf and hard of hearing oriented. Like, obviously the disability spectrum is huge, but I think that is becoming more, I hate to say mainstream, that makes it sound like it's trendy, but you know what I mean? It's becoming more recognized that is a need, and I'm hoping that it continues to be met and that funding will continue to be provided for those communities, and that would open a great opportunity for a nonprofit such as that.
Well, I think that's a good topic to wrap up on, but I got to ask you the last question that I ask everyone, which is, if there was somebody who is an artist, young artist, passionate about their specific form, what advice would you give to them to turn their passion into a profession?
I would ask all young people to the same question that Dr. Carl asked me, which is, what is your why? And if you really think about, like, I for a long time evaded that question. I didn't want to think about it because I wanted to perform. I enjoyed it and I love it and it's fun. And like, I wanted that to be enough to sustain me. But when I really took the time to think about my why and kind of self-analyzed, that has made my path so clear. I mean, you know this, that like I feel like I have been, in our entire 5 years we've been together, I have been pretty laser focused on what I wanted. And it's because I was asked that question and I really thought about it. And that's not to say that I don't mean that performing is inherently a selfish pursuit, but it was for me. For me, it was a selfish and ego-driven pursuit. And it is, and forever will be, a wonderful hobby and something I love, and that brought pretty much everything that's good in my life, theater has brought to me. So no shame. I'm not saying if that is your why, that's great, but just really take a moment, sit with it, and think, what is my why? And I think when you find your why, your path will be so clear.
And if your why is, like you say, quote unquote selfish, which really in this instance, it's not any pursuit of something for your own gain can be viewed as being selfish. And if you're an actor and you want to act and you want to be successful in that, that doesn't necessarily inherently mean it's for selfish or ego reasons. No,
not at all. Yes. Thank you for clarifying
and
that.
If you are doing it and you do the exercise that Allison suggests, and you realize that you are doing it for ego reasons, as I realized in 2020 that I was personally doing it for ego reasons, then you change your reasons, because I still want to do it. Mm-hmm. And so now I am involved in the theater and I'm participating in the theater in a different way, not as an actor, not for me, but to help the theater and to try and do things like this podcast and other things that can help bring awareness
your videos
to the theater.
I think your videos have helped Firehouse, just as a specific case study, tremendously.
Sure.
I really do. And that is your specific skill set and talents that you are, and you're being paid. It's not like an altruistic pursuit, but you have honed in on what you specifically can offer that everyone can't. And you're using that for good. And like, even if for good, it just means you're making a paycheck. That's okay. I'm not saying, you're working for free or anything like that. But I just really, like, for me, it was so crystal clear. And I think it's okay to have hobbies and it's okay to have things you love, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's your why.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that should be your profession.
Yeah. It would be nice to have a profession that could then fund you doing the things that you love to do.
Exactly.
We've talked a lot about if, we're making a good paycheck at work, then we can have the freedom and the flexibility to do a play in the evenings and just have fun and not be worried about making ends meet.
Right. And or donate money to a theater that we are passionate about. Or
volunteer your time, like ushering or
like
whatever.
Say we're at a place where like if we want to go see a play, like we're happy to go pay for the ticket.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. We can like go to the, Virginia Rep box office and buy a ticket instead of, asking for a comp.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's
nothing's wrong with either, but we're just grateful that we're now in a place where, because we've chosen different priorities, we've really chosen the priority of like funding our family.
Yeah.
Whatever that means and whatever that takes. And now, like 3 years into like really putting our nose to the grindstone to do that, we're now seeing some of that freedom that people talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think had both of us decided to keep kind of performing just for performing's sake, we wouldn't be as happy as we are now. We needed to take a step back from it and kind of refocus, and not to open a whole can of worms when we're over time. But I think also me losing my dad made me refocus on what was important to me, and just priorities. And I think all of that to me is interconnected. Your why, your priorities, and how you spend your time. It's all interconnected. And I think we kind of had gotten into like a little bit of a rut of like show after show after show after show. All we're thinking about is what's next. And that can get tedious. And so I would encourage a young person, if you're finding yourself falling into that rut, take a step back.
Well, I think that's a great place to end it. And I know one of us has to go walk the dog.
Oh, man.
I can't believe he didn't come in this entire podcast.
Is he out there?
I don't know. Well, I'm just going to say it. I love you.
Love ya.
Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.